Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign guide for the High Elves, all that you need to know in order to play them. From the strengths of the race, their economy, their research, their armies, their lords, their legendary lords, the things that they have to deal with in the campaign. The High Elves are one of the strongest race in Total War Warhammer 3, while also being a traditional Total War race. In the sense that they don't have the special mechanics like the Beastmen or Warriors of Chaos or Vampire counts or any of that. They're just a regular race that is very, very good. And they're good in the early game, but they're especially good in the mid to late game. Like, consider this campaign. This is turn 47. And I'm already generating 40,000 income. A lot of that, not for buildings, but through trade. So the High Elves have a great economy. They have powerful lords. They have powerful armies. They are a blast to play. They also have Ulthuan for much of the legendary lords, or two, potentially three of their legendary lords. They also have access to Ulthuan. And Ulthuan is an amazing place in that it's got, like Lothern, for instance, Attain, has 4 regions and can generate a ridiculous amount of money, and this is not even its final form. This is still tier 4, but the High Elves do have a lot going for them. So let's break it down, how to play them, what are the things you should be aware of when dealing with the High Elves. Well, one of the things I do need to mention is that Ulthuan itself is going to be incredibly vulnerable from multiple sides. You have Morathi here to the west, you have Be'lakor to the north, you have Malekith to the northwest, and then of course you've got Bretonnia, Kemler, Grom, etc. to the east. And to top it all off, Ikikla to the southeast. So you are surrounded. But one of the things to be said about Ulthuan is that since it's an island and the AI doesn't really handle island invasions all that well. In fact, like in this campaign, for instance, even though I've been at war with Be'lakor for a while now, he did send some stacks, but like only twice, basically. He sent 2 armies, got wiped out, and that's all that he did in the entire campaign. And outside of Noctilus, over here, why wiped out, no one's really threatened Ulthuan. I was very proactive in dealing with Morathi. But yeah, Ulthuan is kind of safe, but also kind of not. It does have a lot of territory to defend, which is always the downside, and a huge coastline. Especially if you're playing as Alariel and you have to worry about being the defender of Ulthuan and keeping all of Ulthuan under High Elven control. But at the same time, although it's very vulnerable, it does have, especially the inner regions, are incredibly safe and offer you a lot. Okay, when it comes to the legendary lords, you have 6 choices. 2 of them are DLC legendary lords, Alariel and Elfarion. 2 are free DLC lords, which is Alifanar and Emmerich, and 2 are the default ones that were added at the very beginning of Warhammer 2, which is Eklis and Tyrion. Now, I've done a whole legendary lord rankings video. I'm gonna link it at the end of this one if you want to go over more details, but just to keep it short, just to go over them very quickly. Tyrion is one of the strongest. He's a strong combatant. He's got a substantial economic benefit for his own army through that upkeep that he gets for Spearmen, Silver and Guards, Archers, Silver Helms. Crucially, he gets a major diplomatic bonus to High Elves, allowing him to confederate easier. He's got a special skill line that is also very useful, helps with your upkeep, helps with your diplomacy. And then on top of that, he gets that recruitment direction -1 for infantry and cavalry units, faction wide. And he also gets a skill. Like, he can, you can skill him to be either an incredibly powerful combatant in battle, though he'll be one by default just with his items. He's very difficult to kill. He's got a very cheap but very powerful army, and he can allow you to recruit more armies far faster than anyone else, and allow you to get a lot of allies and confederations very quickly with other High Elves. So he's one of the best. Techless, he's a mage. He's one of the most powerful mages in the game, though that's pretty much all that he has going for him. He gets recruit rank for lore masters, mages, and archmages. The archmage recruit rank is useful, but Teclis is in a pretty miserable state. Like, just to mention this, Tyrion starts in Southern Ulthuan, which is a great position, and he starts in one of the best provinces in the game in Atane. Teclis starts over here in the southernmost point of the Southlands, and he does have Kairos to deal with. He can, but the thing is, he's in a rough position. He can colonize the jungle, but he's basically isolated on his own. And although High Elves in general are strong, Teclis is probably one of the weakest of all of them. Like, he's got great magic, but faction-wide benefits, he's just not offering as much as the other ones are. He'll have a strong army. Hell, he could wipe out entire armies on his own with just his magic, but at the same time, he just doesn't have the faction benefits that the others do. Alariel, she's also a caster lord, not as powerful as Teclis, though certainly capable of holding her own. But crucially, she gets bonuses when you hold all of Ulthuan, but she does get negatives if High Elves don't hold all of Ulthuan. But she gets an economic benefit, a diplomacy benefit with High Elves, control benefit, growth benefit. She does get an influence benefit. And she has a special structure that only she can use to get tree spirits, and really tree men. So she already, the High Elves already have a very powerful army. She gets some of the deadliest units, like the treekin and especially and tree men are incredibly powerful units. So she can have an incredibly potent ranged force, but at the same time having one of the best melee front lines in the entire game as a High Elf Lord. She does have some downsides, and her starting position in the north as opposed to the south is not as good as Tyrion's, but she also has a great deal to offer. Especially because she has that handmaiden bonus, and she actually has a special skill tree that allows you to recruit handmaidens everywhere. Now, handmaidens are great for some of the benefits that they do provide, but I'll get into lords and heroes in just a second. But yeah, she's a great lord in a lot of ways for faction benefits. She's a powerful combatant in her own right. Again, she's not going to hold a candle to Teclis, but she has a much better faction-wide benefits than Teclis does. Alifanar is flat out the best High Elven Legendary Lord in the game. He doesn't have the recruitment benefit that Tyrion does. He doesn't have the frontline that Alariel does have, but he does get a global recruitment duration -1. Tyrion only gets a recruitment duration -1 for infantry and cavalry units. He gets a global recruitment duration for all units. Pretty substantial. Then he has assassination missions, which give you a significant amount of influence in coin, so you're actually going to have a significantly better economy if you do those assassination missions. But the crucial thing that's not said here, but is actually one of the main things that makes him so strong, is that all of his armies, every single one of them, has, instead of a regular movement stance, they have an ambush stance. It does have a lower ambush chance than a proper ambush stance, but it has -15% ambush chance. But you can use it to ambush your enemies, which gives them a significant amount of power, because when you're ambushing them, especially with when you're ambushing an army, especially with a High Elven army of range units, then that will give you a substantial combat advantage, allowing you to far more easily win fights. But there's more than just that. Beyond the regular ambush stance, all of his armies, yes, all of them can also use basically an underway mechanic. People have compared this guy to like a Skaven Lord, and in a lot of ways it's pretty accurate. Like, he's a guy who relies heavily, all of his armies rely heavily on ambushing, and then on top of that, all of his armies can use an underway mechanic. It's not stated here, but those two mechanics, like just being able to cross terrain, move across the map far faster because of that 10% campaign movement range, and being able to ambush enemies, all of those combined to make Alifanar incredibly potent. Now, here's the thing. He has a rough starting position over here in the north, undeniably so. He absolutely is going to struggle because of that, and he is going to he is also going to struggle because he's got a lot of enemies to the north, to the south, all that, and he can, and for whatever reason, like this screen just doesn't give you all the information you should know. But for whatever reason, he can't colonize Ulf-1. Ulf-1 is not pleasant climate for him. So that is a downside. He has downsides, but the power this guy has is incredible. And also gets the Shadow Walker units. Like, everyone gets the Shadow Warriors, but he gets the Shadow Walkers, which are pretty good units. Especially good for the ambushes you're gonna do. Then there's Elfarion. Elfarion is also very strong, though, for different reasons. Whereas Alifanar is powerful because of his stances and campaign movement range and ambushes. Elfarion is good because he has, like, you get Shadow Walkers if you're playing Alifanar. Okay. If you're playing Elfarion, you're flat out getting some of the very best units in the High Elven rosters that only he can recruit. There's mods that allow it, sure. But if you're playing default, he gets that, and then he gets the Mist of Repress. He can benefit those units. He gets the dungeons. He's not the most powerful lord in combat, but boy, does he have a great deal of power. And he certainly has a different campaign than the other lords, which, like, most of them, with the exception of Teclis, well, like Tyrion, Alariel, and Alifanar start pretty close to Ulf-1. Elfarion is is in the Badlands, basically, and his campaign goals is to fight greenskins, basically. And he gets a lot of tools. He has a significant amount of economic benefits or influence benefits at the start of his campaign. He gets fear against greenskins, substantial benefits, and he has combat advantages as well because he can use a cage ability against enemy lords in combat to try and capture them. And then when you capture them, you can gain experience and money, or you can set them free to siphon off the economy of a faction that you might be fighting. Substantial advantages all around with him. And then finally, Emmerich. Emmerich is awful, but also good at the same time. Like, he's good in terms of his own personal combat ability because he's got the super powerful dragons. He's practically unkillable, actually, in a one-on-one fight. Like, he's really, really hard to kill. He certainly would give Tyrion a run for his money, and Tyrion is already a very durable machine. The problem is, Emmerich starts completely isolated from everyone else. It's one thing to talk about Teclis, who's starting in the south. No, as Emmerich, you've got a much worse situation. And if there's any downside to the High Elves, is that their start can be a bit slow. They scale very well, but their start can be incredibly slow. Like, Emmerich also suffers because he's in a lot of in a mountainous area, and he doesn't have like an underway mechanic like Alifanar does. So there's some fairly substantial disadvantages that Emmerich does have when you're playing him. He's the hardest legendary lord to play of all the High Elven legendary lords, him and Teclis. And the only thing he has going for him is like dragon benefits. And yeah, Invocation of all that kind of stuff. But he just has a lot of downsides, as I see it. Powerful army, but that's not good enough in Warhammer 3. That's all I had to say about Legendary Lords. Check the dedicated video. I go over their skill trees and more in depth on that, but that's just a glance on the subject. When it comes to individual lords and heroes, you have three main lord choices. One is the DLC one, Archmages in particular, and they're actually generally the best, though not in every circumstance, but they're generally the best because magic otherwise can be difficult to acquire, and magic for High Elves can be especially good. What's the best school of magic? Well, depends on the situation, depends on what you're fighting, but most of the time I do find the lore of high magic to be overall the best. But shadows can be pretty good. Life can be pretty good as well. Metal, like a lot of them are useful. I guess it would be better for me to say which ones aren't. I think Heavens isn't really that great. nor am I necessarily too impressed with Death. But to be honest, all of the schools of magic, or beasts is not necessarily too impressive. But here's the thing. When it comes to deciding which lord you want to recruit, you should always look at their special trait. The way the High Elf lords work and the way their heroes work is they all have traits. There's no lords or heroes that don't have a trait, except maybe a few of the starting ones, like Alfarian's starting lord in Evres. But outside of that, they all have either a positive trait or a negative trait. Like, she would have a negative trait. Now, some of the negative traits don't really matter. Like, well, recruitment duration for Phoenix units. That's not really relevant. Phoenix units are very rarely used. In fact, this is a lord I recruited at the very start of my campaign because it's an irrelevant trait. She might as well have no trait whatsoever with this. But then there's some really good positive traits. Like, there's some for 15, there's some for 60 influence. So you need to spend influence. You'll gain a lot of influence if you're playing the High Elves. It's fairly easy. Like, I think you gain it for research, for factions being wiped out, for various things, right? It's very, very, very easy to get a decent amount of influence, right? Anyway, so Archmages. Now, I find Archmages to generally be either give you benefits to spells or to give you economic benefits as well. So, for instance, if I go over here to Death, like, she's got the administrator. This is a fairly substantial benefit. Then there's some with incendiary, some with flammable, some with other traits. Like, they either buff their own personal ability, or they buff research, or they buff magical units, or they buff magic. Princes, they're better melee combatants. I believe they ride better dragons, if I'm not mistaken. You can get better dragons. Like, Archmages can get dragons. Princes can also get dragons, so I think they can get star dragons, whereas the Archmages are limited to moon dragons. And they generally tend to buff your regular army. Like, for instance, this one here will give you a significant campaign benefit to his army, minus 10% upkeep for archers, spearmen, silvering guard, bolt throwers. Basically, the majority of, like, pretty much the majority of units you'd have in your army, if not all of the units you'd have in an army. So those are the kind of benefits princes give you. Beyond, of course, like, just, post-battle loot options. Princesses are the worst lords. I'll get to why in just a second, but they do tend to buff ranged strength. So, for instance, over here, she has Ardent, so that's 30% upkeep benefit to archers, Sea Guard, Illyrian Rivers, Frenzy, and 10% range for ranged units. So that's fairly substantial. Now, looking at the skill trees of these fellows, one of the things you want to get for every lord, be it legendary lords or regular lords, you want to get Rhythm Archer, you want to get Inspiring Presence, and then playing as High Elves, you pretty much, with all of them, want to get Bowmaster. You might want to pick up Militia Master as well if you have any decent number of melee or even a few melee. So, for instance, here I have some Rangers and Spearmen, and so that Militia Master is going to buff them up. Later on, if you get Dragons or if you get some special units, you might want to get Sky Master, Master Strategist, but yeah, you want to get Bowmaster, Militia Master. You want to get the Magic Tree or the Melee Tree. Like, always get about 6 points, maybe 7 points, really, with loose. Like, the red skill line is really good. The blue skill line is also, well, not the blue skill line, the magic skill line or the yellow skill line. Now, talking about mounts, dragons, generally the best. If you, like, Archmages get moon dragons. They can also get a bound spell. And there's some skills here, a lot of useful skills here. On top of that, they do get great rewards, so that's 10% ward save. It's not missile resistance as most lords would get in the game, but 10% ward save is fairly substantial. And a bound spell. Now, in terms of dedications to the gods, because all of the lords that you get, be it princes, princesses, or archmages, they can dedicate to themselves to a god. What are the best choice here? Well, I think the Hukon dedication for 5% campaign movement range is substantial. Though you can always also go for Isha for an upkeep benefit and a casualty replenishment benefit. The other ones, I mean, 15% income from sacking settlements, Adaf, is pretty solid as well. But the other ones, I mean, 10% post-battle loot, fair enough, it's pretty decent. But I personally think that campaign movement range is the most important thing you can get. For princesses, yeah, they do have dedication to gods. They can also get a star dragon. You might want to get the star dragon. But here's their problem. They're a ranged lord. And ranged lords tend to do very badly in battles because they don't have the survivability of the melee lords. They don't have the damage potential of the magic lords. In fact, they barely do any damage because they're barely ever going to shoot. Like, I've played with Alifanar for all the power he has in his campaign. It's mainly because of the army benefits, faction benefits, stances, etc. But he's actually pretty bloody useless in battle. And a princess is actually going to be even worse than that. Of course, if they have a good trait, like she's got Ardent here, right? If they have a good trait, it doesn't matter. You know, strap a Star Dragon on top of that, and yeah, that will do. But a prince will actually tend to do better. Though full plate armor can be useful, but I'm not particularly impressed with ranged lords or heroes in this game. And regular princes themselves, again, dedication of gods, Star Dragon, Sun Dragon, right? Plenty of good choices. Melee skill tree. They're really, really good in melee. The regular princes, they can be really good in melee. They can get a Steed, Great Eagle, Griffin. What about heroes? Choices for heroes. Well, you've got Handmaidens, that's DLC. By default, you've got Nobles, Mages, and Lore Masters. Then you can get Handmaidens with Alariel's DLC. Actually, Alariel and her special skill tree gives you Handmaiden recruitment faction-wide. Now, heroes, of course, also follow the same idea as lords do, in that they require influence for good traits. If you don't have influence, they have negative traits. For instance, this noble over here would give 5% campaign movement range and 20% ammunition for his army. That's pretty powerful. Like, the way it works, right, for lords, it goes in from 0, 15 to 16. For heroes, it's 40 and 10, or no influence cost. 40 is generally what you want to get, but 10 can also give you some decent traits as well. Like, for instance, practice wouldn't be too bad. Or let me just see if I can find anything over here. Elusive would be pretty decent. Now, in terms of heroes, what are the heroes you want? Well, if you can get them, mages obviously are great, right? Because you do want the magic, though not if the army is led by an archmage, though you can get a mage of a different school of magic to supplement the school of magic that your hero has. So, for instance, let's say for instance, that you have an Archmage, High Archmage, which is generally what I do. Maybe you want to get a Mage of Death, for instance. Just some idea. And there's some nice traits, Tinker, all that. Now, Schools of Magic, same principle. I'm not really going to talk too much about the mages
Defender of the Everqueen.
As heroes, really. Because their skill tree is fairly simplistic. Like, you've got the magical tree, all that. Right? Just invest in the spells you want. Generally, like, there's a bunch of shield spells and then there's direct damage spells. Pretty easy to understand how to level up casters. Let's talk about Handmaidens, because Handmaidens are actually the best heroes as I see it for the High Elves. Not because of their combat ability, they're ranged heroes, so they're pretty awful. Though they can have a decent amount of melee ability as well, so they're not quite as bad as the princesses are. So you can either spec them into ranged, or you can spec them more into melee, or you can give them faction-wide benefits. Here's why the Handmaidens win. Because they have this... Okay, so they have their combat tree here, right? Weapon Master, Hard to Hit, Spear Master. Generally, you want to go with Hard to Hit, Spear Master into Foe Seeker. Like, leadership doesn't matter. Valor of Ages, yeah, it's good. But one of the things to understand about heroes, You don't expect necessarily heroes, especially as High Elves, you don't expect them to do a lot of damage. What you want them to do is you want to throw them into a fight and they take a lot of damage, so your ranged units kill everything in sight. That's your game plan. And so you want to get hard to hit, Spearmaster, and even if you're fighting purely with melee, you still want to reduce the damage they're taking, so melee defense gives you a benefit there. Then into Foe Seeker, full plate armor, Sister Shield of Avalon, right? So more hard to hit, and armor, of course, always matters. Deadly Onslaught. Speed can be good, but there's also a Speed of Asuryan. Generally, try and get Speed of Asuryan as a priority, by the way, versus Expeditious Endeavor. Also, Handmaidens do get 5% ward save, control all provinces. You might start to understand why I think Handmaidens are great, and why actually confederating Alarielle as a priority is a pretty damn big deal, because she will allow you to get Handmaidens far quicker. You can get them otherwise, but they're a high-level hero if you're not playing Alarielle, and damn, do they feel like a high-level hero. Because you get, like, just this skill alone, one control all provinces, is fairly substantial, but doesn't stop there. So you can buff their combat ability with these exclusive skill lines. Like, you have to choose one of 3. Generally, though, I find that Diplomat of the Everqueen is the best choice. Unless you really, really want to buff them up in melee, then you can get Protector of the Everqueen, get 15% hit points, Guardian, Entangle. That would be good, don't get me wrong. It would be good. But you're much better off using them for their campaign benefits, rather than their combat benefits. They do have replenishment, they do have growth. Fairly substantial amount of growth, plus 30 growth. So, Diplomat gives you 2 diplomatic relations with the High Elves for each Handmaiden. Just saying that. Then you get Tactful, 2 diplomatic relations with all factions for each Handmaiden. Forthcoming, 5% income from trade tariffs, and then Discreet, 1 influence per turn for each Handmaiden. Just to understand this, I've got 9 Handmaidens right now. Not all of them have these skills. Some of them haven't gotten it. For instance, this one here, I'm just basically using her as a growth stick over here, for instance. Or not even a growth stick, actually, because she has a trait that gives 15% income from buildings local region. So I'm just buffing the economy of Attain over here with her. Though I might want to level her up, at least level her up to get Diplomat of the Everqueen, or finish getting the long campaign victory condition to get hero recruit rank. And I think that would... No, that would be close, but not close enough. But there is a way to buff it up. I believe there is a structure, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on. Gain Veil. Apparently not. Apparently not. By the way, point being, when it comes to Handmaidens, they're great. Because 5% trade tariffs and influence, like 2 diplomatic relations is a pretty big affair. Fairly substantial affair. Then there's, of course, the nobles themselves. And then the lore masters. So I have a noble over here. Nobles, they get knowledge of High Elf, Man's, or Lizardman affairs. Whatever you choose will give you a faction-wide benefit. With High Elf, you get trade benefit and entertainment buildings, and 2 diplomatic relations with High Elves. With Man's Affairs, with the human factions, you get 2 diplomatic relations. It's exclusive. 3% trade tariffs. Like, whatever you choose, you're getting trade tariff benefit, and then a diplomatic benefit with whoever you choose, and then either ports, or industry buildings, or entertainment buildings. And you can also buff trade by quite a lot as well. So you can buff your trade income by a substantial amount. Like, these guys increase trade, tradable resource production increased by 30%, is how the High Elves used to generate a ridiculous economy. They still can generate a ridiculous economy even without using nobles. But that's just one part of it. Nobles can get Great Eagles. They're not necessarily so great in combat, to be quite honest with you, with those Great Eagles, though they'll absolutely hold their own. They do get melee defense, Blade Master, Foe Seeker, all this. Like, you always want to get hard to hit, Blade Master, into Foe Seeker, full plate armor, Blade Shield, and then Deadly Onslaught. And then, of course, Speed of Assyrian. You can use the FLMR Chariot, though if you want more flexibility, you can use the Great Eagle on the battlefield. And then finally, Lore Masters of Hoeth. I'd say Lore Masters of Hoeth are the worst heroes you can have on the campaign map. Though they do have some benefits, but they're just not substantial. Like, Handmaidens give a lot. Mages obviously give you an entire magic school. Nobles can give you a lot of trade and diplomatic relations, trade tariffs. Get a lot of nobles, you'll be swimming in gold. But then we get to the Lore Masters of Hoeth. They're hard to get. Actually, they're the hardest, one of the hardest heroes to get, because what you need is a tier 4. I believe it's tier 4, if I'm not mistaken. Is it? Yeah. So tier 3, Mage Tower gives you only mages. Tier 4 gives you the Lore Masters. So you need tier 4 to be able to get Lore Masters. What that means really is that you won't have a lot of them. For instance, here my capacity for mages... actually, it's the same capacity. Oh, interesting enough. Alright. But is that because... No. Alright. That's all well and good. Well, same structure increases this capacity for both mages and Lore Masters by the same amount. But they're hard to get because they require that tier 4 structure. Okay. Their skill tree... I mean, they don't have a mount. So that's already a major downside because you won't have the flexibility in battle. Some would say that this is a benefit. Sure, strap one of these guys with an Armor of Destiny in combat with a good weapon. They'll do a great job. So if you can get Armors of Destiny for them. But there's no real difference between them and a Noble. I mean, they have the same melee skill line as a Noble, but a Noble has mount options. They don't. And then they have some magic spells, but they don't really have strong magic. Like, their basic spell is awful. Then they get, like, combat buffs, basically, over here, with the exception of Spiral Leech and Miasma. Those can be good. And then, yeah, they get Life Leeching, Metal Shifting. I mean, they're okay, but they're not gonna... they're not necessarily worth the effort to get them. If you're upgrading... an archive to tier 4, you're doing it for the mage capacity or not doing it to get Lore Masters. Faction-wide benefits, they don't have any. Army-wide benefits, they give you training, which gives you a decent amount of experience per turn. Can be worth it. Helps you get to higher and higher ranks with your units, but otherwise, Lore Masters aren't particularly great as heroes, as I see it. Just the fact that they don't have movement in battle is a major downside, because all the other heroes do have movement options in battles. Like, they get mounts, Lore Masters don't. That drags them down as far as I see them in terms of their battle flexibility. And durability wise, I mean, nobles are just as good, no problem whatsoever, and nobles have mount options. Now let's talk about research. The High Elven research tree is something of an annoyance, and I'm sure many people will agree having played the High Elves. The High Elves are a great faction even with very little research. The research can give you some benefits. The way to look at this tree is you've got military advancements. They require you to spend some money to get military advances. 1, 2, 3, all that. But these require buildings. You don't need to get anything previously to unlock them, but they do require buildings. And the benefits you get, there are some nice benefits. Like, for instance, here, in Military Advancements 1, you get Archery Prowess for 15% reload time reduction for archers and Ladder Seaguard, and then you can get 20% ammunition for your range units. This is pretty worth it. But it is going to take a while to be able to unlock all of this. There's a lot of good stuff with this, but what would I say is you should prioritize? Well, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of choices when it comes to High Elven research because it's going to take you a while to unlock it. So you should get Archery Prowess as the very first thing. And then after you get Archery Prowess at the start of the campaign, what you want to get is Spear Wall and Militia Training. You want the weapon strength and you want the recruit ranks for Spearmen, Rangers, and Archer units. Then you might want to pick up Sea Masters and Trumpeteers as well for the movement range. Light cavalry barding is not really worth it. Swiftness is not worth it because Great Eagles, all that. Once you've, at this point, you should be able to unlock some other things. Now, at the bottom, you've got trade good advancements and then cultural advancements. Like with military advancements, it's pretty clear cut, right? Buff your ranged units, precise fletching, like get that, can be great. Upkeep for spearmen, like precise fletching, martial law, absolutely great. And tier 3, let's see what we get. Like I've done entire campaigns, I'm not joking in this, I've done entire campaigns as the High Elves, and I've rarely, if ever, gotten more past than tier 2 when it comes to military advancements. Because, generally speaking, I find, like, yeah, precise fletching and martial law are absolutely worth it. Everything else is not really that important to prioritize. You're much better off focusing on your campaign-wise research. But here's the thing, you need trade advancements. Now, trade advancements, how do they work? Well, trade advancements, if I'm not mistaken, what they require is for you to get this particular structure. Yeah, it does. So you need to get the tier 3 settlement and then get the Elven Embassy building. Now, you generally will want to get the Elven Embassy building, but I'll talk about the economy in just a moment. But trade advancements wise, you need resource buildings, and you need to get those resource buildings at tier 3. So for instance, over here, I've got the Larion. If I get it to tier 3, I get the technology monthly festivals with wine. With the Sculptor's Workshop, I get marble stockpile. So these are faction-wide benefits, but they require you to get those different resources to tier 3. So for instance, I need an Eastern Bazaar for 10% trade tariff income, salt distillery, right? Get that to tier 3, get growth, 10 monthly festivals, like I should be able to pick that up soon enough. I've gotten a bunch of stuff, but this is self-explanatory. As you get resources, as you get them to tier 3, you unlock this, you get stuff that you want. What I would prioritize personally over here is like monthly festivals is pretty good. You don't want extra control as the High Elves just because of the way it affects your economy. Gem setting, pretty damn great. Marble stockpiles, pretty good. Extravagant murals, like a lot, pretty much everything here is good. Like you can't do wrong, except like yeah, armor for chariots, not too substantial. Speed for chariots and cavalry units. Cavalry units that, I mean, yeah, speed for dragon prince is good, but not necessarily worth it. I mean, upkeep for dragons, yeah, that's okay. That will work. But then we get to the cultural advancements. Now, cultural advancements do require a lot. They require a tier 4 settlement. And they require specifically, they require you to get the Elven Court, but not just the Elven Court, if I'm mistaken. So you need the Elven Court. And what else do you need? Because I know... oh yeah, you need the Elven Court, and you need the Shrine of Asuryan. You need both of these together. Now, the Shrine of Asuryan is tier 3, so that's not too big of a deal, though you're basically going to craft the structure for no real purpose other than to unlock cultural advancements. But you need both the Elven Court and the Shrine of Asuryan to unlock cultural advancements. So you need a tier 4 settlement, need the Elven Court, need tier 3 settlement with Shrine of Asuryan. But the cultural advancements should be your absolute priority. Why? Like, more than military, more than trade, cultural advancements give you an enormous amount. So cultural advancements give you the Waystone Network. That's 10% campaign movement range. Only 5 turns to research it. It's not like High Elves have a research benefit, but 5 turns, okay. Then you can get 10 diplomatic relations, court advisors. That's pretty substantial. Hero recruit rank for handmaidens, hero recruit rank for nobles, lord recruit rank +2. Then you can get spy networks, 22 turns for all that. That's at the top, and I would certainly recommend getting court advisors because it's pretty substantial benefit. But then at the bottom, you get all sea regions made visible to your faction, so you can trade with them. Like, if you can see all sea regions, then you can get trade agreements. Though you're not necessarily going to struggle with that, but just bear in mind. I mean, this is especially great if you want to trade with some factions that are very far away. Teclis might have issues with getting the vision, though. You can get it with Wolf 1 with his quest battle specifically. Then you can get construction cost benefits, construction time benefit. Like, all of this research here is far more substantial than all of the military one. Now, of course, you will be forced to start with the military one, and I would certainly recommend getting precise fletching, if not martial law, if you can. But yeah, Waystone Network is a fairly substantial benefit in its own right, and it only gets better from there. Like, both these are, like, this would take 44 turns, it's long term. Like, you're much better off focusing on cultural advancements than any military benefits. Because the way to win in Warhammer Free is not by having 1 or 2 strong armies, it's by having 10 strong armies, or more strong armies. And the benefit here is you will be able to move on the campaign map faster, get better diplomatic relations, but at the bottom, and get higher ranked lords and nobles and handmaidens, so higher ranked. Like, with this, I could get, like, with this and long campaign victory condition, I could recruit nobles and handmaidens at rank 12. So I would be able to unlock the handmaiden special skill tree, for instance. At the bottom, I would save an enormous amount of cost in basically building any structure and give them time. That would benefit the economy, make it stronger, allow me to get more money. So cultural advancements, followed by trade advancements, and of course, followed by military advancements. In particular, archer ones, especially ones that give you ammunition. Those can be useful. But otherwise, just prioritize culture, trade, military, in that order, I would argue. Now, with all that said, let's talk about the economy of the High Elves. The High Elves rely heavily on trade, but not merely just trade. They can also benefit greatly from having a high level of control. But why is that? Well, their basic economic building is the Elven Craftsman. Now, this does generate trade resources, Elven trinkets in particular, but it only generates 100 income by default, though it can go to 150 at level 1 if you have 100 control. Now, getting 100 control can be fairly tricky, but you do have a way of doing that. You have the amphitheater chain, which gives you a lot of control. It can go up to tier 5, and you might benefit from getting a lot of these, or some of these, in your settlements, especially when you're confederating with factions. Confederations will affect you in terms of diplomatic relations, -4. That's, by the way, one of the reasons that handmaiden benefit I mentioned is so bloody crucial, because it helps you with this. It gives you a substantial amount of control. Now, I'm using a mod to remove the public order penalty on Legendary, but I'm getting 10 control from characters, 10 from buildings, 4 from events. And I'm getting 2 from Defenders of Wolf 1, though that's increasing. Alright, all well and good. So the more control you have, if you can get to 100 control, you can generate a lot more income. But that's only part of it. You are generating trade resources, so you'll get more trade income by default, even with this structure. But then we get to insane territory. Of course, you can also have dedicated trade resources, like the exotic animal bazaar. But you also have the Elven Embassy. Each Elven Embassy gives you 10% income from ports in a local province. That doesn't really matter in a lot of provinces, because not every province has ports. It gives you 2 influence per turn. Hero action success chance, plus 10%. That's fairly substantial. 5% income from trade tariffs. 5%. And it stacks on top of each other. To give you an idea, currently in this campaign, turn 47, I'm generating 44,000 income. 16,000 of that is via trade. Ready. And I've got a lot of trading partners. But the reason I have so many trading partners is because I've gotten a lot of Elven fairgrounds, but I also have a lot of Elven embassies, and I've taken all of Wolf 1, got all the trade resources over there, got a lot of things going for myself. So as the High Elves, you may not have the best starting economy, and that's actually something that bites Emmerich in the ass, because he is going to struggle with money. Specifically, he's going to struggle to maintain more than 1 army early on. Actually, all of them may do so. But once you get going, and you get going in a way that's very hard for pretty much anyone else to compete. There's very few other factions that have the growth potential on their economy that the High Elves do. Greenskins might generate more money just because their buildings provide more economy, but you'll surpass even the Greenskins, who have a really, really good economy. You'll surpass them simply because of just how much money you can get with trade, and it scales with heroes, right? Like let's take Lothrin, right? For instance, or take any settlement that has trade goods, right? Useful trade goods. Like take for instance here, 48 barrels. Put a bunch of nobles with the trade benefit, you'll get a lot of money from that. Or don't, you'll still have a lot of money. Like, you know, look at what I'm doing here in Elarian. I'm getting the Elven Embassy, Ventier, Elven Fairground. That's going to boost my economy by quite a bit. Not just by the 100 in my show there, but by quite a bit more. I mean, 5%, I mean, how much is that? Like 10% would be 1,600, right? So 800, 1,000, basically. Like these structures are going to boost my economy by more than 1,000, by quite a bit more than 1,000, actually, I believe. So fairly substantial upgrades. Like the scalability is what really helps the High Elves. But you do need these structures to make it happen. You do need a lot of territory. You may need heroes with the right skills to make it happen. But once you do have all of that, the scalability is insane. I'd argue only Cafe comes even close, but Cafe, here's the thing, the disadvantage Cafe has. You generate a lot more trade than Cafe, because although Cafe has structures, the economic structures that generate income, that boost their trade, they're not generating trade resources from that. So they're going to have a limit. You need trade resources in order to boost your economy. Like so you need to produce things in order to make that work. Like if I'm looking over here, and by the way, I'm not gonna joke, this is probably the first time I've actually looked in the treasury tab in all the time I've played Warhammer 3. But you can see how much value I'm generating from trade. 2,000 with Reichland, 2,000 with Hexoatl, 1,700 in Agareth, 1,500 with Exiles of Nehek, 1,500 with Heralds of Ariel, all that kind of stuff. It is a lot. It is a substantial amount. And there is obviously going to be a limit to how many trading partners, but when you lose a trading partner, for instance, obviously I was trading with Tyrion over here and Elfarian while they still were active, but now I've confederated both of them. So I lost those trading partners, but people want to trade with you. Like factions will easily want to trade with you. Like the Empire, very easily will trade with me. For instance, here I'm about to declare war on the Heralds of Ariel, well, just to give it to Nehek, because they've gotten in a war with each other. But once I declare war on them, obviously I'm going to lose them as a trading partner, but it doesn't matter, because I'm just going to gain another one. So those are the things you should be aware of with the High Elf economy. Another thing is all these gates. These gates are amazing because each of these gates can allow you to put commandment. And you have one really good one that gives you 4% income from trade tariffs. Right? And you've got 4 gates. You don't care about anything else. Like, you don't really care about growth. Like, get them to tier 2, tier 3 maybe. Honestly, if by the point you've got them to tier 3, you should secure all of Wolf 1. So you shouldn't be too worried. Most of the time, you will want to get Lost Splendor just to get that extra growth and construction cost. That's going to be worth it. But once you can reliably get, or once you're surpassing, or once you've got too much growth, and you can have too much growth, that you're growing too fast and your economy can't keep up, you might want to just switch to tribute to the Phoenix King. Substantial benefit to your economy with that, because yeah, income from all buildings 3%, trade tariffs 4%. A fairly substantial economic benefit there. Lots of scalability. That's why High Elves are so strong. Having a strong economy is what makes a strong race. Having good growth, they have good growth as well. Speaking about that, they do have the estate, which starts at 18, goes to 27, goes to 36 growth. Pretty good growth, and they do get 20 growth from rebuilding Lost Splendor.
Done.
Now, army-wise, what do you want to get for your armies? There are many army compositions for the High Elves, but one of the most basic ones is actually one of the best ones as well. You obviously will want your heroes, nobles, handmaidens, mages, lore masters. Okay. Then you want to get, and you can get these from a tier 1 barracks. Like, this is a tier 1 army. I'm not joking. Like, rangers, spearmen, archers with light armor, they're all tier 1 units, with the exception of the artillery, but I'll talk about that in just a second once I find the barracks, because I haven't actually needed it too much. But yeah, at tier 1, your militia camp can allow you to get rangers DLC unit, and archers with light armor. Spearmen are trained from any settlement at tier 1. And this tier 1 army is really, really good, because the spearmen are great line holders. They won't do so well in terms of damage, but they've got silver shields, and they've got a good amount of melee defense, so they'll be able to block a lot of damage. If you want melee damage, rangers are a good choice. They don't have so great armor, but they have pretty decent melee damage, melee attack, melee defense. They'll do a pretty decent job. Though be aware that they can take a lot of that damage. And then, of course, the mainstay of your army are archers. Archers with light armor in particular. The light armor helps them reduce the damage from missile and melee attacks, though you will be able to outrange most opponents and you'll do a significant amount of damage. If there is an issue with the High Elves, it's that although they have great armies, range units, melee units, cavalry even, they can struggle getting siege. Eagle Claw bolt throwers are pretty much necessary in a lot of armies, because if you're dealing with a siege situation, your game plan in a walled settlement, you need to knock down the walled towers and the walls to win the battle. Your ranged units might kill everything inside in maybe one go or two goes. There are some tactics to that, like you attack a settlement, you fight it to a draw, you set the battle time limit to 20 minutes, all that. If you don't have enough ammunition to kill everything, and if your melee units are not too strong, then you just wait for a timer to expire. But you want artillery regardless, especially if you're dealing with Dark Elven settlements or even fighting fellow High Elves, because High Elven and Dark Elven settlements have incredibly powerful towers. Some of the best in the game, actually, from my experience. Like, not only do the High Elves have incredibly good ranged units, they have some of the most heavily defended settlements in the game. And crucially, there's a lot of races that have settlements with blind spots. The High Elves don't. Wherever you attack the settlement from, there's never really going to be a blind spot that you can exploit to use your ranged units, or very rarely will there be one, to use your ranged units to kill everything inside the settlement. So having that artillery is that much more important. The problem is that the artillery is tier 3. So you need an Elven Forge to get that, and you're just getting it for 2 artillery units for each army, basically. Not all that great, to be honest with you, but it is an important aspect. But either way, your army, Eagle Claw, bolt throwers, archers, spearmen, and maybe some rangers, though you don't need them. That's an early game army. Of course, some legendary lords may not use it. If you're playing Alariel, for instance, who I have here, she'll start with some Treekin and Dryads, and she can get more tree spirits over here with her special structure that she can get in her settlement. Though it's not really worth using this for a while, because although Treekin are great, you may want to wait a bit until... Like, I've been running around with Alariel around the campaign map. I haven't had time to stop and just get Treekin recruitment. Though I maybe should, because they're good units. But even without those unique units, or Shadow Walkers or anything like that, like Alifanar gets Shadow Walkers, Alfarian gets Mistwalkers, those are all good units, but the baseline Elven army is right here, just as you see it. Although, moving here, you may want a skirmisher unit, like some Illyrian Reavers. The reason is, suppose you're outnumbered, then you may want to corner camp or deploy on an elevation or good ground, but you want to lure the enemy to attack you. Let's say you're attacking, they're on defensive, you position yourself in a prepared position, and then you want the enemy to attack you. Skirmishers help you greatly in terms of achieving that. Just one skirmisher unit. In this case, a regiment of renown that I have as part of that army. Now, later on, in terms of ranged unit potential, like, you will want to replace archers with Sisters of Avalon. Especially if you've got Alariel, because Alariel does get some benefits, like 15% missile strength for those sisters. That's quite a lot, by the way. So she can benefit from having a full stack of the Sisters of Avalon.
Champion of the
But outside of just getting a bunch of really powerful range units, and not all of them will want, like if you're a Leafonar will always want Shadow Walkers, Tyrion. Like, Tyrion will benefit from having regular archers just because of the upkeep benefit. The user only will have the economy to support the full sister stack on him, but he doesn't necessarily need it either. Hell, Tyrion himself can solo entire armies, because, especially with his items, which have thankfully been fixed. But what do you want to get later down the line? Well, maybe some Lion Chariots can be great as flankers. Laverne and Seaguard, not to replace the archers, but to supplement the archers. Like, Laverne and Seaguard are pretty good melee units. They're not as good as archers. They don't have the same ranged power as archers, though they're much better in melee. But yeah, these guys can help supplement the archers and spearmen, though not completely surpass them. Then you've got Silver and Guard at tier 3, which are just better spearmen, just a replacement for spearmen. And then, of course, you can get dragons if you want, star dragons, dragon princes, arcane phoenixes, all that kind of stuff. But the mainstay of your army, spearmen, archers, eagle claw, bolt throwers, with maybe some rangers or some silver helms thrown in as flankers. Some phoenixes, all that. You can make an entire dragon stack, especially if you're Emmerich, you can make that. But to be honest, I don't necessarily see the point in it. The reason I say that is that even a full stack of these kind of archers can be a fairly hefty cost, like 4,000, right? If you start getting dragons, that's a lot of money that you're throwing into it, because each dragon is like, each star dragon is 600 upkeep. You can make a dragon new stack, but as I've said, the best, a powerful faction is one that can support a lot of armies. If you start going down the path of dragons, maybe even sisters, you're going to have fewer armies. And it's just better to show up to a fight with 4 stacks as opposed to just showing up with 1. It will help you in the Auto-Resolve, for instance, because the Auto-Resolve does value higher numbers more. So, like, for instance here, you know, I've got the Sisters of Twilight. Forget how the factions are going to view me, right? They've got the full stack. It's a powerful stack. If I fight this battle manually, I'm not sure I would win, because the sisters are really good in a fight. But since I've got such a powerful, so many units, I'll win it, even though I will lose those to rangers over there. But that's not really too important. But it's just a... it's just an idea. It's better to show up with multiple stacks. Like, consider this situation. I've got 2 stacks over here, a third here that I'm going to move into position. Then I've got 1 stack here with Alariel, building another stack. I just want to give Alariel the sisters, and then give the Lord here all the units that Alariel currently has, and 3 stacks at sea. Right, so I've got 4 stacks in this area, 3 to the north. That's 7 stacks, 8 stacks. The turn is 47. Now, I'm able to get, like, this is the big advantage of the High Elves, that their baseline units, their tier 1 units, are are incredibly good, and you can get a lot of them, can maintain a lot of them, and you can really throw just numbers at the enemy. Like greenskins might throw more numbers at the enemy, but there's something to be said about the Zerg swarm of the High Elves that is available, because they've got strength and numbers to throw against their enemy. And of course, if we're talking about the High Elves, one of the things we have to talk about is the fucking Sword of Cain. Now, I am not necessarily too fond of it. I have it on the Lord. I just did this entire campaign, by the way, for the purposes of this video. And of course, I had to talk about the Sword of Cain. Let's talk about the Sword of Cain. The better it gets, the more campaign downsides you get. So, in this case, I'm losing -20 diplomatic relations with all factions, 5% upkeep for all armies, -5 control in all provinces. It is a pain in the ass, and it's not worth it. Because here's the thing. The Sword of Cain gives you a significant amount of combat potential. A lot of armor-piercing damage, ward save, and the Sword of Cain ability. This is a vortex spell that recharges if your hero is engaged in melee. So putting it on an Archmage that doesn't have a dragon yet, not necessarily the best choice. I didn't want to put it on Alariel though. Though she can use it. She can use it very well. She's actually pretty scary with that because she's got like a flying mount. And she doesn't lose a quest item. But yeah, I couldn't be bothered moving Alariel to the Shrine of Cain because she was busy beating on Morathi to waste time to just pick up the Sword of Cain. Just picking it up is a bit of a pain in the neck. So you get a powerful item, a lot of ward save, a lot of armor piercing, and a vortex ability that can wipe out entire armies on their own. You put that, like an Archmage will do pretty well with this because they've got that great ward. So you're looking at 35% ward save, 40% ward save with Armor of Caledor that I do have over here. And if I got the Talisman, I don't have it. If I got the Talisman of Preservation, that would have been a gigantic amount of ward save that I'd get for items and talents, especially the Sword of Cain. But you do lose a lot. The economic damage this thing does is substantial. 5% upkeep is the reason why these armies are so costly right now, at the moment. And it gets even worse and worse. The stronger it gets, the worse it gets. So that's what it is with the Sword of Cain. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth the effort. It's not worth even the steps it requires, because to get the Sword of Cain, you need to get the Shrine of Cain and construct the Shrine of the Widowmaker. And the Shrine of the Widowmaker, yes, it's worth it for the recruit rank, don't get me wrong on that. And it will provide a substantial garrison over here. But it's a very, very costly building. Though 15% post-battle loot money is certainly a nice benefit to have for your faction, but it's a really expensive building at the same time. Worth it for the faction effects, not worth it for the sword, I feel like. Yeah, the Sword of Cain is just not really that great. If it wasn't for the major diplomatic downside with all factions, literally all factions, like if it was just a High Elf situation, that would be a different affair, but it affects your relations with all factions, and that's worth saying. Anyway, that's all I had to say here in this video. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.